As already introduced, I'm Berg, Distinguished Engineer with IBM. And my talk is going to focus on predominantly DevOps and the usage of DevOps within an enterprise. How many folks here actually work for an enterprise company? Yes. All right, my people. So, hopefully a lot of this will resonate. And a lot of it's going to be based on my experiences working with and talking with a number of enterprise customers across many different industries and the challenges that they have. Hey everyone out there, we can't hear. We can't shut the door, it's a curtain, I don't know what to do. Maybe someone can go out there and tell them to quiet down. I'm going to move this up closer to my mouth. How's that? All right, so maybe that'll be a little bit better. I'll just speak a lot louder then. So one of the first things that we're noticing, I'm going to bring this all the way up. How's that? Yeah, maybe that's not going to work. All right. So something that we released recently, it was a C-level suite study that IBM did. We do one almost every year. And we published it earlier this month. I want to say the beginning of this month. And what it did is we went through and we interviewed a number of C-level execs to figure out what's troubling them, where are they focused, where are they going, those kinds of things. And it's interesting, I mean, this day and age, and all the time, I mean, there's certain things that keep your executives up at night. And we're just trying to figure out what is it that's keeping you up at night? Why aren't you sleeping very well? And almost all of them, and Andy pointed to this one a little bit, it's this notion of the Uber syndrome. Everybody knows Uber, everybody has used Uber, I'm sure we're in California, Uber's great. But it's basically this idea where a competitor comes in with a completely different business model, something not similar to your business model at all, and they just crush you. You're completely blindsided by it, you didn't see it coming, and they come in and they take over. Uber is obviously the classic case here, biggest taxi company and no taxis, right? But their user experience is so much better than any other taxi company out there, and that's why individuals start using it. So, different business model, and they flatten and completely change the industry. So, what's really scaring a lot of these executives is the fact that they have just mountains of data and everything that tells them these are our competitors. And before they know it, someone out of nowhere, they call them ankle biters, comes up, not even seen on the map, right? Didn't even see him coming. Comes into the industry, changes their industry, and takes over. And that is scaring the hell out of a lot of C-level execs. Where are these companies coming from? These small startups. They are incredibly fast, incredibly agile, and incredibly smart. And they're able to do things with a small number of resources and come in and completely change the industry. So, I mean, a lot of buzzwords come out of this, but fundamentally, this is the disruption phase. I mean, we're seeing digital innovation completely disrupting industries. And while that sounds like buzzwords, I mean, this is a reality. I mean, the digital innovation is taking over. We're seeing smaller startups be able to take advantage of cloud resources and other types of resources to make very quick, innovative applications that have a completely different user experience model and can change their industry within the matter of months. I mean, it doesn't take years anymore to do that. I mean, you can do it in months. So it is very fast, and it's very scary for an enterprise. I mean, enterprises don't move this fast. And why don't they move this fast? I mean, you all belong to enterprises, so you understand this. You understand that an enterprise has existing workloads, hundreds, if not thousands of applications that were built 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or maybe 30 years ago. I actually heard a story. We had a customer that had a mainframe application that was built, and one day they ran into a problem with it. And come to find out, that mainframe application, they couldn't find where it was running. The reason why they couldn't find where it was running because they bricked up a wall around it, and it was inside a bricked up cabinet that no one knew that the machine was still in there. But it was still running for 30 years and never had a problem. So that you actually don't see those kinds of machines anymore in these startups, but this is what our enterprises are dealing with. I mean, these applications have been around for a long time, and most likely they're not going anywhere anytime soon. So you got to deal with them. You got to understand how are you going to deal with these systems. You've got regulatory constraints. I mean, how can you move I like the slide that Andy had. What was that? The funny police? I mean, that's true. I mean, it's hard to move fast and still stick to regulatory compliances. And that really does change the way in which you do continuous delivery. But probably the biggest issue I see, and hopefully this is not a surprise, I'm sure it's not, it's the culture, right? The deep-rooted culture that exists within an enterprise makes it very difficult to change. I've seen grassroots changes, I've seen pilot projects. That's not hard, that's easy to create. What's hard is to take something like that exists in an enterprise and scale it. Scale it from 10, 20 people working on it to 100, 200, 1,000. That becomes very difficult because it gets more attention and then it moves higher up into the business. You get more of your executives dealing with it, and then if you don't have the buy-in all the way up through the top, those cultural challenges are going to just impede any more progress, and they're going to change it. And he pointed it out even in his ideal continuous delivery, and then the reality, yeah, we see that, right? That reality becomes, why did you create the Word document for doing your deployment? Because that's how we've done it for 20 years, and we're going to continue. Well, that's not the right answer, but that's what we're fighting against in these cultural changes. So what is the solution? I mean, fundamentally, the solution here is you have to be the disruptor within an enterprise, not the disruptee. And it shouldn't be any surprise, you've got to adopt DevOps methodologies, DevOps practices, DevOps tools. You have to break down those silos, and you have to work as a unified organization. But the problem with this is it's very difficult within an enterprise. I mean, it's not easy to break down those walls and those silos, and it's not easy to work as one unified team. And to be honest, I mean, in an enterprise, the whole notion of a two-pizza box team that owns your service from cradle to grave, yes, I buy into that, I love that, but that's not a reality in the enterprise. That's not how it works. That doesn't scale to 20,000 people working on it. It simply doesn't. You also have the difference of skill. I mean, if you got a company in a startup, you've got 20 people working on it, 20 people, those 20 people are probably A performers, right? Top-notch, 1%ers. They exist in the enterprise too. But when you've got 2,000 plus people, not everybody is an A performer. You've got a lot of B's and C's. Some D's and F's, but you move those out. You do have a span of talent, and that's just a reality. And within an enterprise, and being able to scale innovation, you've got to learn how can you make all those different skill levels be productive in the entire process. And that's not easy. But one benefit here is that cloud, hopefully, is no longer a buzzword. Hopefully everybody, raise of hands here, how many people are using cloud technology in some form, fashion in their company? Okay, using it for dev test. I'm sure most of them. Using it for production. Okay, that 2 years ago, that would have been a lot less. And I'm actually impressed to see more people, especially in enterprise, using cloud. Because what I have found is that every enterprise that I've talked to, last year, some enterprises were dabbling in cloud. This year, every enterprise is establishing a cloud strategy. Every single one. I haven't walked into one enterprise that was not defining a cloud strategy. They may not be completely implementing it today, but moving into 2016, absolutely. They're gonna have a cloud strategy. And what I've seen with this is that there's really these three phases within cloud for an enterprise. I have a lot of existing IT, right? And that existing IT, we've got processes around it. It doesn't change often. We want to improve it. Well, how can we improve it? Well, the first thing that a lot of folks think about, especially coming from the IT organization, we're going to move to cloud. How are you going to move to cloud? We're going to lift and shift. We're just going to pick up what we got and put it out on the cloud. You are. Okay, that's going to be interesting. Typically, we see that as cloud-enabled, where folks take an existing application, put it out in the cloud, and just take efficiencies of cloud compute resources. It's a cost-saving tactic, almost exclusively cost-saving. And then there's others that have different ambitions, and those different ambitions is to move fast, speed, purely speed. And what I'm seeing there is, in an enterprise, they're looking at cloud-native. And cloud-native applications are different from cloud-enabled, where cloud-enabled is, if it runs on a virtualized environment, it'll run in the cloud on that virtualized environment. However, it may not take advantage of all the elasticity and the scale and the efficiencies of the cloud. It's just running in the cloud on compute resources. Cloud-native, on the other hand, is an application built specifically for the cloud to take advantage of the cloud resources and capabilities and services to have hyperscalability and reliability. So that's the difference here. And the idea, at least within an enterprise, is that a cloud-native application can be built quickly at a lower cost. But the key here is it can be built quickly. The challenge for enterprise customers, at least what I've been seeing, is they're trying to figure out how I go from this existing IT to cloud-native. And a lot of times what I hear is, okay, we're taking our existing applications, we're going to re-architect them, and we're going to run them out in the cloud as a cloud-native application. Okay. So that might seem like a good idea, but as we progress further in here, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. Oftentimes it's not a good idea. So the biggest challenge here is, how can you innovate quickly, move to cloud-native, but still leverage the business-critical services and data that's available in the existing IT. That's the challenge that I'm seeing in an enterprise, time and time again. And we'll touch on some of the topics along the way, but that's what I'm seeing as a major shift in the thinking of how to move fast within an enterprise, is how to get to cloud-native as quickly as possible. So I got to talk about microservices. Who's heard of microservices? Everybody's heard of microservices, right? Who understands it? All right, so we do have some people that do understand microservices. Microservices aren't just small services. Microservices, by the way, if you don't know microservices, first of all, it is an architectural strategy. It's not something that, as a customer, I'm going to see a microservice, right? I'm not using a microservices per se. You don't even know it's a microservice. You're using APIs and services made available to you by a provider. If it's implemented as a microservice, so be it. But that's a technical choice. That's a technical architecture. And the microservices, why I'm bringing it up here is microservices as an architectural pattern really fits cloud native extremely well, right? The decoupled nature, isolated business capabilities, the ability to implement continuous delivery and rapid delivery of updates to individual microservices it gravitates quite nicely into a cloud environment. So what we're seeing is, or at least what I've seen, is that many of the enterprises that I talk to immediately gravitate towards microservices. I'm building cloud native, I'm going to be building microservices, which seems on the surface great, but one of the anti-patterns that I've seen here is that they believe I'm going to do everything using the microservices architectural pattern. I'm going to take my existing applications and I'm going to move them to microservices. I'm going to break them up into microservices. Everything's going to be a microservice architectural pattern. And I get concerned when I hear that, because there's workloads that fit quite nicely using an architectural pattern, but not all of them do. And you have to be cautious about when and where you choose to use microservices. It's not a silver bullet. And oftentimes, when you're moving from your monolith and moving to microservices, you have to ask the question, do I re-architect my monolith to be microservices and a microservice architecture? So a monolith, the difference between a monolith and a microservices architectural pattern is that a monolith has many components, but those components are tightly coupled and packaged and delivered together. So their life cycle of the application is one unit, and that unit is delivered across all your environments. You can deploy a monolith application, you can scale it quite nicely. But the challenge with the monolith is it gets quite large, with a large number of intertwined dependencies, which means if you have to make a single change, it's going to affect a large number of the components within the monolith. So for example, if your database has to be updated or migrated, you might have to take down all the components in your application, shut it down while you do the database upgrade, which means no customers are using that application because you've got to take an outage. So this is, while that monolith approach might work fine for existing IT, it doesn't work well for the user experience on the cloud. Right? You don't want to go to your website, you don't want to go to your mobile app, hit it and say, we're sorry, we're updating our monolith. Come back later. It doesn't work that way. No one's going to want to use that. However, the monolith is a good pattern for getting started. If you're building a new application, a lot of times you might start off with the idea and the intent to go to microservices, but you start with the packaging it up and delivering it as a monolith initially, because it's faster, it's easier. Monoliths are much easier to deploy and manage because it's one unit. Microservices, on the other hand, are many different units working together in a decoupled fashion, so it's a highly distributed system that requires more infrastructure and more management to support it. So there is a trade-off, but it is more resilient, it's more resilient to change, and you can introduce a CD process that can update individual microservices independent of one another. So we do see a number of enterprise customers, as they start off, they might start off building a monolith, but each of the components are decoupled from one another, but they're just packaged together so you can get quick, immediate updates and deployments into an environment. But as far as going back to the initial point here, the existing IT, when they have a monolith, oftentimes it's best not to decompose the monolith and invest in making it a microservices-based architecture that runs on the cloud. It's a lot of investment to do that, and if that application isn't broken and it's working and you got a process around it, you can find yourself spending months, maybe years, trying to re-architect an application that wasn't designed to run in the cloud to be a cloud-native application implemented as a microservices architecture. It's very difficult to do that, and oftentimes not the right choice. So, before I move off of this, one of the other things that I'm seeing, and maybe you guys have seen this as well, one of the other biggest challenges for an enterprise is dealing with their database. Within the enterprise, this is a very simplified picture, but the monolith has multiple components and they all share the database. In reality, in the enterprise, that database is shared by many applications and many components. And they're all doing direct access to the database and reading from it directly, and they're doing batch processing in the database and everything else. And customers are thinking, well, if I'm going to take that and move it into the cloud and build microservices architecture around it, how do I manage the data? And they understand and they know that in a microservices architecture, each microservice encapsulates its data storage. And you communicate via well-defined APIs, synchronously through REST protocols, or you're using some messaging system for doing various communications across all the microservices themselves in an asynchronous time. Now, the interesting thing here is that the data, what I see as an anti-pattern is many times they'll take their data model, and the first thing they think about is, I'm going to decompose and build microservices by replicating my data model as the structure of my microservices. And the first thing they start asking is, well, how do I represent the database transaction across multiple microservices? All of these things they're good questions from an enterprise point of view, but they don't fit a microservices architecture. And again, probably another reason why, if you need that strict database batch processing and transaction support, probably not a good candidate to move to a microservices architecture in the cloud. Definitely something to consider, and obviously something that you wouldn't want to move to microservices architecture. in most of these cases, what we recommend for the customers is to identify an API, a business level API for that data structure that you have in your existing IT, and expose that to new applications that you're building in a cloud native manner as a well-defined API, a business API. And what this does is it allows new innovative solutions to get created in a cloud native architecture and microservices-based architecture and communicate to your back-end services using natural APIs. From the point of view of building the microservices app, it looks like another service. It's another API that I'm going to be invoking. So let me shift gears a little bit. At IBM, we did a massive reorganization at the beginning of this year. We're very much building products for enterprises in a traditional manner, which is building packaged software and throwing it over the fence, giving it to customers, and they install it in their data center and they run it. Most of our development teams are very much traditional development teams. We build it, we test it in our environments across multiple different configurations, and then we give it over to somebody else. We don't manage those. They're not services per se. When we switched over to and formed the IBM Cloud Unit, the Cloud Unit was specifically set up to start transforming the business to move those packaged products, at least the capabilities that they have, into fully hosted managed services in the cloud, always on services available in the cloud. And we immediately ran into a number of cultural challenges, skill gaps, you name it. I mean, most of our developers didn't have an operational mindset. They didn't know how to build and architect an application to run and scale in the cloud. And this was a huge challenge for us. So what we did is we formed basically boot camps. We called them DevOps boot camps. We reorganized the teams and we got executive buy-in all the way up through our general managers that we're going to reorganize the teams into smaller co-located teams. And that's exactly what we did. We based some of it off of what Spotify has, the structure of Spotify, but we had to modify it to fit into an enterprise group because we have a lot of small squads. Most of our squads are anywhere from 5 to 10 would be a large squad. But we've got, I don't know, 50 to 100 of these squads across the board, and probably even more than that. I'm just hazarding a guess at this moment. So what we did is we had everybody go through these boot camps, training of here are the set of tools that are going to form our tool chain, pull them together, and really build out how you're going to build out and operate cloud services. And it helped a lot, but fundamentally what it did require was we had in IBM different groups. We had software groups. In software group were development software groups, we had operational software groups, we had services teams and everything. All these came together into what we call the IBM Cloud Unit. So our squads are now made up of traditional software developers, but we also have folks that were in the field operating and managing services in the client account. So we truly do have DevOps-based teams. One of the things that was interesting out of this, though, is that oftentimes you read these DevOps teams, they're responsible for their service, cradle and grave, and there's no operations team. At an enterprise level, that wasn't true for us. I mean, the operations team didn't go away. However, their role was very different. We don't throw over the wall and then they operate and they manage it. No, that's not their responsibility. Their responsibility is to set up common configurations and management across multiple squads. Things that traverse all the squads, like networking settings within a production environment or multiple production environments. We don't want everybody going through and setting up the firewalls for their services. No, that's got to be managed by a single unit that's controlling that environment. So our operations team, which we call conductors, is responsible for that. They're also the first responders. The conductors team squad is the only squad that's different from the others. They're not co-located on purpose. They're global, across the globe, so that we can have 24/7 support. So the first responders, whenever a page goes off, they get called, and then if they can't resolve it, then the development squad gets the page. So PagerDuty will ping you in the middle of the night, and you still own it. So we still follow that mentality that the squads own their code, and they own it cradle to grave, but we still have the first responder operators that manage the environments for us. So a lot of this, we've been working on this for over a year now, but a lot of the lessons that we've learned with other customers went into what we were doing in our own transformation. And we developed a methodology around that, and we've been adopting that internally, and we thought, you know what, why don't we just put this out there as a methodology that we've been using. So we call this the IBM Bluemix Garage method, partly because we've got Bluemix garages across the globe as well, and a Bluemix garage is basically a place where you can go as a customer or a business partner of IBM. You can go in there and they will teach you about these methodologies, how to apply them and how to use them to build cloud-native applications using IBM Bluemix and other tools and vendors that are partners with IBM. So it's a great opportunity if you've ever done it. There's one here in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, at Galvanize. That's one of our more popular Bluemix garages. But basically, the Bluemix garage method is formed around these 6 primary tenets of think, code, deliver, run, manage, and learn. And there's capabilities, practices. The website down here has information about each one of these key themes. But more important is right in the middle, the culture. Because all of this defines the set of practices and it defines a set of tools. But if you haven't adopted the cultural changes that are required to allow you to move quickly in this space, then those practices and tools are not going to really transform to being innovative in your space. So it's pretty critical, and that's why it's central to the whole theme here. So again, these tenets, the culture plus the 6 practices, themed areas, provide a set of foundational building blocks for us and our customers to start adopting a DevOps methodology and a continuous delivery tool set for delivering and operating fundamentally our services within our cloud environment. And it's not even just the cloud environment, but also on-prem services as well. So just to touch on some of them, culture, again, I pointed this out earlier. Culture is the most important aspect of it. We literally, internally, we had to reorganize to achieve the cultural changes that were necessary. We couldn't keep the same silos. We had to break down those silos and change the team structures. Because fundamentally, and we've seen it, I mean, your architecture is going to follow the architecture or the grouping of your teams as well, right? So you need to break down your teams, break down those silos, and reorganize. And in this case, it was more than just ops coming into the development teams or the development teams going into the ops teams. It truly was adopting all the way up through the executive level this idea of how you develop and deliver code. Even more than just the organizations, it's the expectations. You're not date-driven. You're driven by your service level agreements, your ability to deliver code that you can manage and scale reliably out in the cloud. And if you can't achieve a certain SLA, well, I can't put new function out until I can achieve those SLAs in the base function that I have. So it really starts coming into, okay, how do you start building those services for the cloud? And this is where we brought in the idea around think. So we introduced IBM design thinking earlier in the year and late last year. And we've incorporated it into every single one of our squads. So every squad has a designer assigned to them. A designer might work with a number of squads, but every squad has a designer. Every squad has a product manager as well. But the designer in this case is responsible for not the UI design and things like that. Yeah, that's a part of it. But in this case, the designer is the designer of the user experience. What's that user experience for the service that you're going to put out? And the user experience obviously will be the UI, that's part of it. It's also the command line. What's the command line user experience that you're going to see? Anything that the customer engages with your service, we go through IBM Design. As part of our service, before it goes out the door, design has to check off on it. That yes, this is the service that we agreed to. These are the capabilities for the user experience. And we do go through building, when we first put out a service these days now, we go through and build a minimal viable product. Brings in those kind of lean ideas into the development of your services. And I view that that is critical when you're moving into cloud native, it's critical to have that startup mentality. Partly because you need to get something out very fast. Someone told me once, if you deliver something out into the cloud and you're not hardly embarrassed by it, you waited too long. So there's a lot of services I'm embarrassed about, so I think I'm on the right track about getting it out as quickly as possible. But you need to get it out there quickly, and the reason why is because you got to learn. Get out your base function that is viable, something that adds value to a customer, and this is where our designers come in. What's the minimum viable user experience that will add value? Let's get it out there, and then let's measure. Let's understand what's working, what's not. Yes, that's measuring the system. Can we operate it? Can we keep it alive? But even more importantly, do we know if it hit the mark with the customer? Is the customer happy with it? Is that the user experience that they wanted? If so, great, let's add to it. We can iterate on it, especially if it's a cloud native application, it's easy to put new function in. It's API driven, you can put another microservice in there that adds more capabilities, more functionality to it fairly quickly without impacting the rest. But if we never hit the mark with the minimum viable, then we need to make a very conscious decision that do we go forward, or we pivot, or we kill it and do something else. And we've killed a number of our services easily. I mean, it wasn't a huge investment, so if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. You just kill it and move on. But the key here is that we have to have the right platform. I mentioned cloud, right? You're moving to cloud. How do you move quickly? And many of the enterprises, they're battling with this now. How do I pick the right provider? How do I pick the right platform? How is that platform going to help me innovate faster, but also allow me to interact with my enterprise content? I still have to deal with that. I have to have a continuous delivery process that takes into account not only my new cloud native applications, but my existing IT as well. So we've got IBM Bluemix. This is our cloud portal. It's built on top of SoftLayer as well. So SoftLayer is an acquisition we made a couple of years ago that provides data center services across the globe. What's unique about Bluemix is that it's a portal that provides capabilities, services for developers to rapidly build and compose web applications in this cloud native idea. So you're building your function of your microservice and you're composing and using other services to achieve your goals. Database services. Who wants to deploy a database these days? You can go and get a database service, whether it's a NoSQL database with Cloudit, or it's a Redis or Elasticsearch with Compose.io. You go get their service and just bind it to your application and use it. The other provider of the service is responsible for keeping all the operational characteristics of it up and alive and working for you. And I can tell you, it's a liberating, if you've never used services as part of your web composition, you gotta go try it. The day we started putting out services where I didn't have to deploy my database, it's a wonderful experience. Completely love it. We use Cloudit. Cloudit is our first and foremost NoSQL choice within all of our IBM services. If you're going to deploy a service and you need a NoSQL database, if you're not using Cloudit, someone's going to ask, why? Why did you deploy something? We have a service for that. And it's rather good. I've never had a problem with the Cloudit database ever going down. They manage it much better than I would. There's also other services in here. The catalog is quite broad. We've got Watson Cognitive Services for doing things like speech to text and trade-off analytics. We actually have a company doing a football fantasy, and they're using the trade-off analytics from Watson to allow you to do better choice selections of your fantasy football choices. So it's actually pretty cool there. The Bluemix platform, what's nice about it is it's built on open standards. So it's built leveraging OpenStack for virtual machines and object storage. It's built using Docker for containers. It's built using Cloud Foundry for native Cloud Foundry applications. And what's nice about this is it provides you a means for using those communities to understand how those technologies work, using community content and running it here within the Bluemix context. We also have different deployment models. What we found in the enterprise is not everyone's ready to go to a public shared environment. We provide that. You can get started quickly, but we also provide a dedicated managed system in our own data centers. So that's our dedicated Bluemix. And then the third offering is a local Bluemix, which is deployed and managed on your data center. So it's remotely managed and deployed by us. What this enables, and I hate this title, but I'm going to use it anyways because Gartner's using it. It's a bimodal IT. I don't think bimodal is a good term here. It's multi-speed, right? You have groups within an enterprise. Fundamentally, think of that chart where it showed the moving to cloud native. You're moving to cloud native because it gives you the ability to start building out a microservices-based architecture. You can move quickly. You can set up continuous delivery processes for each and every one of those microservices. Deliver and deploy them independent of one another very rapidly. And as an enterprise, you want to be able to leverage and use your existing data services that run your business. If those are exposed as an API, then you can interact with them. But if you have a tight binding between your cloud native applications and your back-end services, you're going to move at one speed, one delivery speed. You're going to be bound to the processes of your existing IT, which we all know is much slower, right? So you don't want that. You want the ability to move quickly, the freedom to move quickly, the agility for the cloud native app. You want the ability to improve the continuous delivery process of your existing IT, but you don't want those processes bound to one another. And you do that by having systems that interact between them so you can share data like change management, but each and every one of these can have their own pipeline, their own delivery pipeline for managing the deployment out into the production environment that is not tightly bound to one another. And this is going to require work around API management, clear understanding of your APIs and your services, and tools that allow you to communicate changes across both. So here's an example of an environment. Existing IT down in the bottom box is all on-prem. We utilize, from a deployment pipeline point of view, you have your SEMs, various SEMs, multiple. You have a continuous integration system, maybe 1, 2, 5. Most enterprises have many continuous integration systems, not just one. Jenkins is quite popular. We use Jenkins ourselves for our continuous integration and automation. Many of our improvements for the continuous delivery pipeline then use an application release automation in this case. We use Urban Code Deploy internally. Many of our customers use Urban Code Deploy as well. Urban Code Deploy allows you to manage and describe your applications and their components and deploy them consistently across many applications and environments. In this case, you can deploy to your existing IT, or you have the choice of defining cloud templates in Urban Code Deploy. And Urban Code Deploy can manage the deployment of those environments. And it's all based on OpenStack capabilities for defining and managing the deployment of those environments. And that's what we call cloud enabled. So now you've got one system that can do both your existing IT and cloud enabled. And then in the cloud native, we have, within Bluemix, there's a number of tools that are hosted available to you. Source control, GitHub Enterprise, as well as a delivery pipeline tool. You're free to use them, you don't have to, but what they provide is you have individual pipelines for each one of your microservices that can run at different rates and paces, and then you use defined APIs for your services on-prem. You expose those in Bluemix in the API catalog. So now when we were talking about web applications being composed in Bluemix, they're being composed by not only other microservices, but also composed and using services for your on-prem resources as well. So, already touched on this. The delivery aspect from the methodology, incredibly important for continuous delivery. It's all about automation. Automation, automation, automation. Touched on Urban Code Deploy. Urban Code Deploy, again, provides, it's a critical aspect of a continuous delivery pipeline process. It provides uniquely the application deployment automation support across multiple environments. And it works well with your existing tool chains. If you've already got them, your SCMs, your continuous integration. So what we have, we've got the integrations with Jenkins, as Andy was pointing out. A lot of times what we see is it goes from the SCM to Jenkins. Jenkins builds, tests, puts the artifacts into an artifactory, and then that gets coupled directly into an Urban Code Deploy system, which is then responsible for deploying it out to the environment. And you can see more at the booth out here if you want to see a demo of that. Quick example, Hiscox is a specialty insurer. They insure things that probably no one here owns, like planetary interstellar probes and observation stations. I don't have one, but if you do, they will insure it. They've got over 2,000 employees, so they're an enterprise customer as well across 28 offices in 13 countries. Their releases were manual. It took a very long time. They had 8 staff that were required to do manual releases. Again, this was the document that you had to go through and do the release. They could do 1 release a year, basically. It took a long time. They introduced Urban Code Deploy last year, and their savings were staggering. So, reduced the staff by 75%, 89% time reduction. Another big one here, 97% increase or reduction in cost for each one of those releases. So huge value by, again, automating your continuous delivery process. Highly important for building cloud native and managing the overall existing IT as well. And just to leave you with one of the tweets that Jonathan Fletcher, who's one of the enterprise architects from Hiscox, they were able to do one of their deployments. It was funny, he did a deployment from a speeding train. Literally, because it was fully automated, you didn't have to log in, you didn't have to SSH into a box and perform some changes right there on the system. Actually, you don't want to be doing that. He was able to do that, he was able to press the button, a new change came in, he could deploy that right out into production while on the train. So they have seen huge, you're seeing all my stuff now. They're seeing huge benefits by introducing automation into their delivery process. So absolutely critical as you move forward. So I'm going to close this out. Lots of interesting things. I'm going to be out here most of the day if you want to ask more questions about your experiences in the enterprise, how we utilize Bluemix to create cloud-native applications and the integrations into the existing IT. So come check me out here at the booth. We have additional sessions later today, so definitely go check those out. A lot of good stuff. I'm going to leave it right there. And I already ran out of time. So come out to the back door.